Welcome to Tuesday Talks, where we are exploring climate data portals. I'm Alex. Today, we're joined by Lex Duplessis, who is a technical delivery manager at Link Digital, where he leads implementation of CKAN data portal solutions.
Oh, thank you. It's nice to be here.
So, getting to the conversation. Why do many organizations choose to have CKAN as their data management system?
I think like the main reason would be flexibility. There are other good solutions on the market. Some of them are very niche. Some of them are very complex and very rigid. Like I think that's probably a good word. Like they fit for purpose, but as soon as you kind of start moving away from that original purpose, they become very expensive. To adapt to your needs. And this is really where I think CKAN shines, is the flexibility it brings. Obviously, CKAN is backed by a community. And I think that's kind of where the flexibility comes from, because in that community, everybody has different requirements from what they need from CKAN, different ideas, and the way you kind of put that together is by including flexibility from the start, because you can't really have a rigid solution to try and fit so many different requirements. Yeah, so that's like I think that's probably flexibility, and then just cost effectiveness. A lot of the organizations we work with do not have infinite budgets. So they can't go with solutions that isn't worth the cost. And then looking to something like CKAN really does tick that cost effectiveness tick box for projects that do not have big budgets.
Thanks, Lex. Just extending this question,
Mm.
and it's also about control. So you don't have a proprietary solution. You don't have
Yes,
right?
that's a very fair point. Yeah, where in CKAN you can kind of do what you want. You can configure it the way you want, and you can kind of, if you don't like something, you can always change it. Whereas off the shelf solutions sometimes do have that constraint where you can configure some of it, but you kind of run into a wall pretty quickly where it is you as an organization will have to change the way you do your business to fit the framework in which the platform allows.
That's fair. That's fair. It's also flexibility. There's also freedom to explore, to create own solution, to contribute.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah.
And to see what other people are doing. I have a couple of extensions that I follow that has really nothing to do with any of the portals that I work on. It's just I think that they look pretty nice. There's cool solutions to interesting problems that I haven't come across, but it's still a good solution.
It's great to be a part of a living community, right? I feel it the same.
Yeah.
Cool. What role should metadata standards play in climate data portals? How does CKAN support these standards?
So when we're talking about standards, I kind of want to just touch on the main ones that I typically work with. There's like schema.org and DCAT. And the real reason for that is interoperability between portals. A practical example would be, let's say you call something a house. What's the definition? So what is a house? Is it a single room place where you sleep? Is it a 5-room mansion? Right? Like this, what's that definition? So until we can define or agree to what is a house is maybe 4 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms. And unless we can agree on that, what you call a house and what I call a house is not the same thing. And that's like just using a very practical example, because everybody knows what a house is, but like, how do we define it? Now, if we want to define something that's a little bit more complex, so for example, what's unit of measurement, right? So unit of measurement could be how many buckets of water would it take to measure something. it's probably like in some context it might be a good measurement, but in others it doesn't mean anything. Like how big's the bucket? Like how many liters of water is in the bucket? What type of water? What's the buoyancy of the water? So we need to agree to a standard. We need to agree to a common framework in which we can define something. And as soon as we can do that, then suddenly data that you're collecting on ocean currents can be translated to the flow of a river, because we're using the same measurements, we're talking the same language, and then that's really where the standards become a big factor.
Fantastic example
Well,
per house. I think, yeah, that's
well, and just to bring it back to the question, so how does this pertain to climate data portals? Well, climate data has to do with the nature, right? In my the way I think about climate data portals would be we're showcasing measurements, we're showcasing scientific observations. Well, not necessarily scientific, but we're sharing observations, we're measuring things, and we want to share that data. And then we definitely need a common language we can talk, and defining what are we seeing, what are we measuring, what's the results, and that's where we're definitely, I would say, adhering to at least a standard. Doesn't have to be the one or the other, but adhering to one is probably a good idea.
My experience with CKAN is that it's a strength of CKAN. There are many CKAN portals. They talk to each other, exchange information, extract information, like harvesting. I keep this example from Spain, European portal with its send data, then Spanish portal in Madrid, which captures data from provinces. And so it's hierarchical sort of relationship, but they're exchanging data as well. With portals that you launched, was this component, I don't know, visible, important, this interoperability between portals? Yep, just
yes. And actually we saw some of the portals I've done, we saw the flip side of this, where there was no standard being adhered to, and that significantly increased the complexity of the task in trying to weave the different information into one another. So yeah, I've done multiple portals where we did harvesting, syndication, where we're sharing the data between portals, and that really, if there's a standard to adhere to, that's a pretty trivial task. As soon as you don't adhere to any standards, it becomes really difficult. It does increase the complexity, because now what you need to do is you need to translate. You need to go and say, all right, your definition for this metadata field, how does that relate to my definition of metadata fields? Are they the same? Can I say they are equal, or do I now have to define a new metadata field in my portal to describe what you're trying to say in yours? And yeah, it does play a big part of that, and it does really, like something like DCAT makes it really machine readable. So then harvesting becomes really a trivial exercise.
And with DCAT as a standard, it becomes easier, I guess. But what do you think?
I'm just using DCAT as an example. Like any standard, because you have a definition, it really does make it easier. But the fact that DCAT is so widely adopted, I would say yes. It really, that makes it super easy, because the definition's all the same. If you define something as a metadata field, I can with confidence say that maps directly to one of the fields I have already in my portal, and I understand how that relationship works.
Right. Thanks, Lex. How should organizations approach data quality standards specifically for climate data?
So how should organizations approach data quality standards specifically for climate data? So I think this is maybe okay, let me rephrase this. This is a question of how the data is collected and what it is used for, right? So how's data collected? I've worked with portals where data collection could be as simple as how high is the river level compared to a measuring stick every morning, right? it's not super scientific. It's a pretty obvious observation. There could be inaccuracy in it, but what you can get out of that is over time, how does that level change? It doesn't have to be accurate, but it gives you an indication of what's happening in that observation. A different way of collecting that data would be using something like a depth sonar to get a very accurate reading on how deep is the water every day, right? And you can get the same result, but it depends on the question you're asking. So
Mhm.
what is my real question in this measurement? Is my question I want to be accurate to within 1 centimeter, or is my question over time I want to see how does the level change, right? Because then really that does change. So now you want to ask yourself the question like, what standard applies to this? How rigorous do I need to be in these measurements? Because
Mhm.
if I'm using a measuring stick, my accuracy is pretty low, because like there's quite a lot of errors you can make in that measurement, but it's still valuable data. So then the other question would be, how how do you collect this? Like, how are you collecting the data? Like, is this a clean environment where you can do a scientific research and you can kind of anticipate some of the variables?
Mhm.
Or is this an effort driven by a community where everybody's kind of just feeling their way through it and measuring? A good example, like I would like to use, is my father-in-law. He has a rain catcher out in the garden, and every time it rains, he tells me that they had 30 millimeters of rain that
Mhm.
fell. Right? It's a very inaccurate measurement, but it's still valuable data, because if everybody in the neighborhood collected that information and you logged it somewhere, over time you can get a pretty good feel for how much rain should be falling in a given area, for a year, right?
Mhm.
Um, but it's a very inaccurate measurement, but it's a community working together to gather that data. So now choosing a standard to fit to that, I don't know. It's really not my field of expertise, but I can see like you could dismiss the data and saying like it's bad data because it wasn't captured using a very specific tool, right? And just dismiss it. But I don't think that's fair, because there's still value in that data. So I think then choosing a standard would be, you need to kind of be careful, because you don't want to be dismissive of the data, but you also still want to get the insights, that you can get from data like that.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic because we had a discussion within the community. Um, so there were voices that were saying CKAN is not restrictive enough, so you can post like anything, different formats. They could be, I don't know, not super clean. They could not adhere to anything. If you want to, you can just post whatever.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, what should you do? Not to post?
Yes.
Maybe better to post and kind of mark it anyhow with metadata so people can decide do they want to use it? Should they pick it?
Yeah.
It's a quite philosophical.
Yeah. I get what you're saying, and I would probably lean towards rather post it, and kind of, if you post it, it can be used. If you don't post it, it nobody knows about it. So
Right.
rather post it and spend more time in the search, but then at least you can do something
Yeah,
with it.
I thought when we were setting for developing CKAN 3.0, what would be the overarching goal where we are leading, where we're going? More data posted, more high quality data posted. But when
Yep.
we're talking about high quality data, it's like you right away understand it's the organizational boundaries. It's like
Mhm.
a lot actually into it. And can you solve it with software? It doesn't look like so, but posting more data, so being better connected, having better interoperability with systems with the organization. This seems more solvable from the software standpoint. So,
I think you can cross some bridges by this, so the software kind of guides you. So if you're familiar with CKAN, adding a data set, it kind of does guide you on a minimal set of metadata fields required to describe the data that you're inputting. And I think being thoughtful on that process and making sure that fields are required, minimum fields are required, adhered to in a sensible way. I don't think it would take that much effort to uplift data that's very unstructured into something that is discoverable. It might not be the best quality, but it will make it discoverable. And using CKAN as an example for that, you could have a look at your approach and say, well, if I'm implementing a data portal based on CKAN, what fields adds the most value to making the data discoverable? And building your portal around that really does, I think, start to address that issue.
Okay. Thanks, Lex. Very interesting perspectives that you're sharing. I'm really enjoying the conversation so far. How can organizations measure the real-world impact of their climate data initiatives?
This is a little bit of a broad question.
Yeah,
So
sure.
I've put together a couple of points I think we can touch on. If you really do want to kind of identify your data, like something using like a DOI service, just to mint the DOI for your data, I think that really would be the first step. Because now what you can do using that is you can cite the data and you can see when others cite your data. So that would be, I really would say, like the first step in tracking how the data is being used.
Mhm.
Then the second one you might, or the second metric that you might be interested in might be site visits. How often are people viewing your data? And there's a couple of good tools for it. I'm most familiar with Google Analytics, but I do know there are other service providers providing exactly the same service. That's a really good metric because now you know how frequently are people interacting with your data. And then a different way you could also do it is, I know as a default, the DCAT includes a schema.org mapping of the data. You can always upload your mapping to your sitemap to something like data search from Google, data set search from Google.
Mhm.
And what that means is if people are searching for data sets, Google will actually present your data sets in the search results under data sets.
Mhm.
That also does make it a little bit more discoverable, and then that might lead to more site visits and more citations of your data set. So I really think it's being proactive in making sure you know how to measure who's using your data and who's viewing your data. Not to be intrusive, but just so that you know that there is interest in the data that you're putting out there.
Okay. Interesting. Thanks, Lex. We had the extensions demo day recently. So, and we started with the flexibility of CKAN as the power of the system. Maybe because you're launching portals, you launched several, and they're of quite big impact, big open data portals. Can you name 1, 2, 3 extensions you're relying on usually? Are they extensions that are supplied by community, or you're bound to develop some new stuff all the time? So how
No.
it works for you in your practice?
We try to reuse as many of the extensions as we can. This serves two purposes. One, you have a community supporting those extensions, which means we're sharing the load of supporting them. And secondly, also, it just has to do with cost effectiveness. You could reinvent the wheel every single time you need a tire, but that's a lot of work to do that. So reusing is really a cost effective way to try and keep the portal affordable. If we had to redevelop everything from scratch every single time, I don't think there would be a business case for using something like that. Some of the ones I really like, and I'm going to be a little bit biased here because I do work with them quite a lot. is the charts extension. We've rolled that out to a couple of portals already, and it's just a nice way to visualize data. It's a good way to tell a story because especially for tabular data, it's sometimes hard to kind of see what's happening over a long period of time, especially like if you have time series data. It's not always obvious that something is happening, but as soon as you can visualize it, it really does add to that insights that you can glean from the data. Something that we've been using quite often, especially in the new portals we're launching, is the single sign-on. This kind of just seems to be the go-to for every portal that we implement these days, and this really comes down to the ease of use, because now it just integrates with your single sign-on provider, so you don't have to remember passwords, you don't have to set up profiles, you just log in and everything's already done. And it's and from a company or organization perspective, it makes managing users in the portal a lot easier. What else? Actually, DCAD. So the DCAD extension, we talked about it earlier. Like every single portal that I've done recently has incorporated the DCAD standard. I do believe it's because it's so widely adopted in North America and in Europe. And it just so happens that those are the geographic areas that most of the portals I've been doing lately fall in. But it seems like most of the portals that we do these days, or that I do these days, rather, do include the DCAD standard.
Great, Lex, fantastic conversation. Some topics we planned, some we just picked up right away, and conversation flew fantastically. It was such a nice experience talking to you. I hope maybe not the last time, maybe we would pick another topic, because you're a really great person to talk to. You know the topic is just absolutely clear. Cool. Thanks, Lex, for joining us.